If you look at the code that we use in the beginning of our section to use the use effect, and then we call the draw in order to access our element and control the DOM, there could be a problem here. If we don't check the draw method, it can cause an infinite loop. So what we did is we created some code to check the data to make sure it wasn't updated. And then if it wasn't updated, then we manipulated the reference and we drew our text element inside of the p tag. However, we got a problem here. We're using a use effect and we have the code, but what if we need to reuse the same code a few times? For example, we want to create few scenarios that will update the code, not just a data change. Then we're going to have to copy paste the same code a few times. That doesn't make sense, right? So what we can do is we can use a callback, use callback, which is the same as use memo. So if you look at the React doc, you'll see there's a use callback that what it does, it's memorizing the function and allow us to make sure that it only runs once, and then we can use it inside of our use effect. So it's that method is not going to call all the time. We use this in previous sections when we build the code, and I'll show you here another example. What we can do here, for example, is we're checking that the data wasn't changed. So what we can do is we can move the data change inside of our use effect, and there we go. Hold on. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to take the code, the check if there was a data change, and I'm going to put it inside the use effect, and only if there is a change, then we're going to call the draw. Okay, and then we don't need all this code inside of the draw. Now the problem is that when we put the draw there, it's going to get called all the time on every render. So we don't want all this code to get called all the time on every render. So what we can do is we can use that memorized, we can call it memorized draw, and the type is going to be use callback or use memo, and then we can pass this method required that we put dependency. Hold on. So we need to add, if we don't need the dependency, we can just put an empty array. And I'm missing a bracket here. Okay, so we put the callback inside of our memorized draw, and then in the dependency we need to put any dependency that we're using. Here the dependency we're using is the data, but even if we don't need any dependency, we need to leave a dependency empty array, otherwise it's going to fail. And now instead of calling draw, we can call memorized draw and add memorized draw is a dependency for the use effect, and what it's going to do is going to create our we have to move it up, the memorize, because we cannot call it before it was created. So this code block needs to be moved up. Here we go. I can put it right before it, and what's going to happen is going to run the code one time and then it's going to memorize it, so we don't need to run it all the time. Let's see what it's saying now. Okay, the errors are gone. So what we've done here, now we have a use callback method that we can use in few use effects, and this way we can run the same code if we need to tie to different properties that we're tracking, and we don't need to copy the code, and we can make sure it's not running a few times.